Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Horowitz, and welcome to Northern Virginia. We'll be sharing some exciting experiences featuring famous people and places for your groups to enjoy. But first, a bit of housekeeping before we dive in. To ensure the best experiences for you and everyone else, we ask that you please take a moment to mute your microphone before we begin. Also, please send any questions you may have through the chat function or hold them to the end of the presentation. We are eager to answer everyone's questions at the conclusion of the presentation. Additionally, for optimal viewing, we recommend you change your view to speaker view in the top right corner of your screen. Without further delay, let's begin our adventure in Fairfax County. Fairfax County is a short 15 to 24 miles from Washington, D.C., and easy to get to with 4 major interstates running through the county, as well as 2 airports flanking us. Dulles International Airport just west, and Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport to the east in Arlington. I'm pretty confident you will recognize a few of these famous personalities that have called Fairfax County home over the centuries. If you're going to Washington, D.C., where you'll see the White House, why not plan to visit the home of the first president of the United States, located just minutes away from Washington, D.C., right here in Fairfax County. George Washington's Mount Vernon is the most visited estate in the U.S., with over 1 million visitors annually. The estate sits on 385 acres, and in Washington's time was 8,000 acres more. Enjoy a docent-led tour of the mansion, visit the gardens, Washington's tomb, or tour the working farm. Visit the fully functioning reconstruction of Washington's grist mill and whiskey distillery to learn about George Washington and how he was one of the largest whiskey producers in the United States at the time. Moving 10 miles south, let's head to another famous George's home. The founding father, George Mason, wrote the Virginia Constitution and the Virginia Declaration of Rights, on which the U.S. Bill of Rights was based. Start at the recently remodeled Visitor Center to learn about George Mason through his actions and ideas. Groups can enjoy a guide-led tour of his mansion or field trips focusing on 18th century life or exploring Mason's legacy on preserving individual rights. Just 10 miles from Gunston Hall, you can visit 2 iconic and contrasting architectural masterpieces located on one estate, 2 residences on the property, one a federal-style mansion, and the other a groundbreaking Usonian home, make the estate one of the most unusual historic sites in the country. Woodlawn is a 126-acre estate that was originally part of George Washington's Mount Vernon. The main federal-style house was designed by the architect of the U.S. Capitol, Dr. William Thornton. George Washington gave the site to his nephew, Major Lawrence Lewis, and Lewis's bride, Eleanor Nellie Park Custis, in the hopes of keeping them close to Mount Vernon. 3 minutes walk from this mansion is the understated but equally impressive Pope Leahy House. It's the only Frank Lloyd Wright site in the Washington, D.C. area that's opened to visitors. It's one of the finest examples of Wright's Usonian homes, a series of inexpensive but well-designed residences for middle-income owners. Encounter African American history firsthand at Tinner Hill. This close-knit community is of national significance for being the location of the first rural branch of the NAACP. Tinner Hill Historic Park is the site of the home of Joseph and Elizabeth Tinner, the couple who fought segregation laws after the borders of neighboring towns were redrawn, cutting directly through their thriving community. The 14-foot Tinner Hill Ark was built to honor the people of Tinner Hill community and is also a nod to Joseph Tinner's past as a stonemason, since the ark design was a specialty of his. From equality and racial justice to women's rights, let's look at another place that features women who made history, the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial. There's currently no other place in America that tells a complete story of the suffragist movement, and this memorial that recently opened will do just that. Sitting on 1.6 acres, This national memorial features replica White House gates, 19 informational stops, and a beautifully landscaped meditation garden. The memorial will have a special focus on the 120 plus suffragists who are imprisoned at the Lawton Prison, which is now the Workhouse Arts Center. And let's look at a famed outdoor space that's named for its founder as our last stop. Established in 1969, the Elizabeth Hartwell Mason Neck National Wildlife Refuge was the first national wildlife refuge established specifically for the protection of our nation's symbol, the bald eagle. Today, the 226,000-acre refuge encompasses mature hardwood forest and the largest freshwater marsh in Northern Virginia. Bordering the refuge is Mason Neck State Park, where visitors can enjoy a variety of recreational opportunities, including kayak tours, photography workshops, ranger-led nature workshops. And now I'll hand it over to Heather in Loudoun County.
Thanks, Linda. As she said, we have headed west to Loudoun County, located just 25 miles from Washington, D.C., and home to Dulles International Airport. With more than 40 wineries, Loudoun is known as D.C.'s wine country, but we cannot forget the history that has made Loudoun unique. Historic homes, charming towns, and interesting tidbits make Loudoun a great place for a little lesser known history for your groups. We'll start at the George C. Marshall's Dodona Manor. Located in downtown Leesburg, Dodona Manor was the home to George Marshall from 1941 to 1959, which were some of his most influential years on society. Marshall was not only the Army Chief of Staff under FDR, but he was also the Secretary of State under Truman and Secretary of Defense under Eisenhower. He was best known for the architecture of the Marshall Plan following World War II, which was the economic recovery plan credited for saving Europe from bankruptcy. In addition, he also served as the president of the Red Cross, won Time Magazine's Man of the Year 2 times, and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work following World War II. The home offers an excellent docent-led tour, which focuses on both General Marshall and his wife, Catherine, their eclectic and extensive art collection, the history of George C. Marshall, and more. A few of my favorite facts from the tour: about 90% of the pieces are original to the home, and they have a piece of art that was painted for Marshall by Winston Churchill. Of course, the one on display is a recreation. Groups are welcome, motor coach parking is available, and they can offer foreign language tours with enough notice. Staying in Leesburg, we next visit Morven Park, the home to former Virginia Governor Westmoreland Davis, who was in office from 1918 to 1922. Though Davis was governor in the early 20th century, this historic home has more than 200 years worth of history. Groups can enjoy a docent-led tour that takes the residents from a modest fieldstone house to the Greek revival we see in the pictures above, with stops through art via their 16th century tapestries and hundreds of pieces of silver, along with the local agriculture history that makes Loudoun so unique. In addition to his time as governor, Davis was mostly self-taught in the art of farming and advocated heavily for agriculture and political aid for farmers. The mansion sits on 1,000 acres and is just one of the group options. Groups can also visit the Windmill Carriage Museum, featuring 40 antique carriages, and on Saturday evenings in July and August, groups can enjoy polo in the park. Also located outside of Leesburg is Oatland's historic home and gardens. George Carter inherited the land that would become Oatland's in 1798 and designed and built the historic home and walled English garden in 1804. Purchased in 1903 by the Eustaces, who were Washingtonian elite, they found it mostly in disrepair. From there, she set to rebuild the home and garden to her liking until 1964. The family donated the property to the National Trust for Historic Preservations, and Oatland's is now designated as a National Historic Landmark. Groups can visit the mansion and gardens and choose from a variety of tour options, including a standard mansion tour, a tour that follows the important role the enslaved population played in the home, an art or architecture tour, and of course, a garden tour. Aldie Mill is next, and it was built in 1809 for legislator Charles Fenton Mercer and saw many prominent 19th century visitors, most notably President James Monroe, who had his grain ground here while living at neighboring Oak Hill. Though the mill is not operational every day, Groups can request a milling demonstration with a local miller while visiting. Just down the road at Mount Zion Historic Park, which is most notably known for its multiple uses during the Civil War, from church to prison to battleground to hospital, this little space holds a lot of history. Visit one or both properties on one of several driving tours through the area with a local historian guide and see how these two historic buildings played such a large role in Loudoun County's history. It's hard to mention history without doing a little roundup of some of our towns and villages. Leesburg, the county seat, still holds much of the charming history it has for centuries. Though it was the selected location for the county courthouse in 1757, Leesburg was not incorporated until 1813. Still home to historic streets and buildings, Leesburg can be explored on own as a way to enjoy some free time for groups, or perhaps enjoy a short walking tour to hit all the historic spots in downtown. Fun fact, Leesburg, Virginia was briefly the capital of the United States when during the War of 1812, the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution were taken out of Washington, D.C. as the British burned the White House. Located along our southern border, Middleburg is known as the horse and hunt capital of the nation and was established in 1787. Previously called Chinn's Crossroads, Powell chose the name Middleburg because of the town's location midway between Alexandria and Winchester on the trading route, now known as Route 50. Middleburg is home to the Red Fox Inn and Tavern, known as the oldest original inn in America, dating back to 1728 and opened by the cousin to George Washington. More recently known as the home to the Forbes 5-star resort, Salamanders Resort and Spa, owned by Sheila Johnson. These historic lined streets in Middleburg have seen the likes of Elizabeth Taylor, Jackie Kennedy, Robert Duvall, Paul Mellon, and Michelle Obama, among others. Walk the streets, shop the boutiques, and take a tour to find out more of what makes Middleburg unique. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a few smaller villages in Loudoun County. Waterford was founded by Quakers in 1733, and this exquisite village, comprising of dozens of colonial red brick federal homes, looks as if it has been preserved for 200 years. The entire village has been designated as a National Historic Landmark and opens its streets during the colonial-style Waterford Fair each year. Take a walking tour of the small village or enjoy a history talk at the Old Stone School. Nestled in the gap in the Short Hill Mountains is Northwest Loudoun, Hillsborough. Established in 1802, is one of the best preserved rural towns in the county, or in the country, with historic fieldstone buildings hugging Route 9 and giving it the look of a medieval European village. Any of the towns and villages can be included in driving tours throughout the county, whether the focus is on Civil War or civil rights, the birth of the wine industry in Loudoun, or more. As we move on, we are going to head back towards the city and the water to Alexandria, Virginia. Take it away.
Thank you, Hannah. Welcome to Alexandria, Virginia. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Lindsay Chase, and I am a destination sales manager at Visit Alexandria. I am so excited to explore Alexandria with you all today and explore all of the architectural gems and history that we have to offer. Just to give you an idea where Alexandria is located, we are right on the Potomac River within eyesight of Washington, D.C. Old Town Alexandria, our downtown area, is just a 5-minute drive from Reagan National Airport and just a short distance from Washington Dulles International Airport and Baltimore Washington International Airport. We are also right off of I-95. This makes us very easy to get to. Named one of the South's prettiest cities by Southern living, Alexandria, Virginia invites HGTV lovers and architecture buffs alike to roam among the city's rich collection of historic homes and imagine themselves in another century. In Old Town Alexandria, you can spend an afternoon strolling 1 square mile of historic streetscapes and revel in the range of design styles from Federal to Victorian. Today, I'm going to take you on a little virtual walk through Old Town. Our first stop is Captain's Row. Captain's Row is Alexandria's most picturesque cobblestone block. These Federal-style row houses with colorful doors and flickering glass lamps bring in travelers from around the world. Visitors like to wander along the brick-lined sidewalks as cars rumble atop the uneven 18th century surface. Named after Captain John Harper, who built many of the homes, Captain's Row is a favorite site for photo shoots of all seasons. My personal favorite is the fall when the leafy trees fan out into a green and gold-hued canopy. Once you've visited Alexandria's famous cobblestone street, head to the most iconic and tiniest home. A private residence located at 523 Queen Street, the Spite House is the skinniest house in America at a mere 7 feet wide and 325 square feet. This house earned its name in 1830 when an irked John Hollinsbury built it to keep horse-drawn wagons out of his alley. Once you've explored the Spite House, go a couple of blocks up to the Leaf Bendel House and Museum. This house has over 200 years of local and national history and offers guided tours for your visit. Just off the bustling King Street, step through the gates of the Carlisle House. This house was built by city founder John Carlisle between 1751 and 1753 for his new bride, Sarah Fairfax of Belvoir. This house is rich in history and can be explored through guided tours, exhibits, and city events. Finally, you can spend your day in Alexandria on one of our self-guided or tour-guided strolls to explore the beauty of the history and architecture that Alexandria has to offer. We have an architecture stroll, an Old Town walk to see all of the art, a waterfront walk, a Black History trail, and a Del Rey mural stroll. All of these walks have a little bit of everything and can be the perfect addition for your group itinerary. I hope everyone enjoyed this virtual tour of Alexandria. Next up is Portia in Arlington.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hello, everyone. My name is Portia Connerly, and I'm the Director of Sales for Arlington, Virginia. And I always like to start with a few fun facts. Arlington, Virginia is the smallest county in the U.S. that manages its own affairs, and we're actually only 26 square miles. And as you can see by looking at this map, the county was originally part of the 10-mile square surveyed in 1791, but returned to Virginia in 1846. So let's start with the Arlington House, which is located within the Arlington National Cemetery. It was constructed between 1808 and 1818, and most people know it as once being the home of Confederate Army General Robert E. Lee, but it was also the nation's first memorial to George Washington. With over 650,000 annual visitors, the Arlington House is the most visited historic house museum in the National Park System. At this time, the house is still under a $12.5 million restoration, which will be completed by this summer. When the project is completed, visitors will see Arlington House as it was in 1860, with rooms restored to their historical appearance. Additionally, the quarters for the enslaved people of Arlington House will be restored to better represent and tell their stories. As visitors move between the mansion and the new museum and bookstore, they will pass along accessible paths that stretch through the restored grounds, including heirloom gardens. People who cannot visit in person will enjoy a robust experience through virtual tours, complete with detailed displays of the rooms and objects that belonged to George Washington and the Lee family. The residence of Robert E. Lee and his family before the Civil War, Arlington House connects to many important figures, issues, and events in American history. Built by enslaved laborers of George Washington Parke Custis between 1802 and 1818, the house and gardens have served many purposes over the last 200 years. A memorial honoring George Washington, a family home for the Lees and Custises, a plantation estate and home to 63 enslaved people, a military headquarters for Union troops, and a community for emancipated slaves and a national cemetery. Next up, the Hendry House. This is a restored 20th century mansion that has historic elegance in a park setting. During the post-World War II period, the population of Washington metropolitan area grew and transportation networks were expanded as a result. Most of the large estates and farms that remained in Arlington County were subdivided for suburban development. In contrast, the Hendry estate remained intact and its landscaped gardens preserved the Civil War earthworks from substantial erosion. Consequently, Fort C.F. Smith is the best preserved Civil War fort in Arlington County, and the property is one of the county's few remaining undeveloped estates. The Hendrys eventually sold the property to the County of Arlington in 1994. The 19-acre parcel, including its remnant earthworks, buildings, and designed landscape, has been designated Fort C.F. Smith Park. And now this home actually is now used for meetings, weddings, and special events. Next up is the Ball Sellers House. This farm cabin was built in the 1740s by farmer John Ball, and it is the oldest structure in Arlington County. 3 generations of Carlins owned the house next, including Glenn Carlin, namesake William Carlin, who was a tailor for George and Martha Washington. The house has been restored to its colonial era condition, and there are docents available to discuss its owners, as well as provide free tours of the farm cabin and the grounds on Saturdays, April through October, and on summer holidays from 1 to 4. And there are free private group tours that are available by appointment as well. Next, we have Dr. Charles Drew, who you may have learned about in school. He pioneered blood banking during the 1920s to 1940s. He lived in a modest 2-story frame house in North Arlington, which was his childhood home. He lived in this house from 1920 to 1939. Obviously, this is an image of the historical marker since the house is no longer there, but I felt it was very important to mention him. He was also the first African-American to receive a doctorate of science in medicine, where he specialized in blood plasma and transfusions. His groundbreaking research led to the modern-day blood bank. The Charles Drew House is a National Historic Landmark and is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Last but not least, since we are covering notable figures, I couldn't leave out the Arlington National Cemetery, which is Arlington's most visited site, which receives over 3 million visitors a year. While President Kennedy's eternal flame and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier are the most visited grave sites at Arlington National Cemetery, here are a few more notable grave sites you may or may not have heard about. Besides many prominent military service members, there are other names that may be familiar to you, such as Joe Louis, heavyweight boxing champ, Thurgood Marshall, John F. Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Edward Kennedy, the Tuskegee Airmen, which were the first African-American military pilots and airmen who fought in World War II, the Buffalo Soldiers as well. And one of the most notable recent burials, of course, is the one and only Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that's just to name a few. Well, that's it for Arlington. Now we will hear from Mike, who is with Prince William County.
Thanks, Portia. Heading west or south from Arlington, you'll run into Prince William County, only 25 to 29 miles from Washington, D.C. The county is bisected by Interstates 66 and 95 and borders the Potomac River to the east. The major communities in Prince William include Manassas, Gainesville, and Haymarket on the I-66 corridor, and Occoquan, Woodbridge, Dumfries, and Triangle/Quantico on the 95 corridor. My first stop in Prince William on our tour of historical Northern Virginia stops is one of our most iconic and recognizable attractions, Manassas National Battlefield. It was here where you'll find the history of one of the most iconic figures in Prince William County history, Judith Henry, the first civilian casualty of the American Civil War. She was 85 years old, she was an 85-year-old bedridden woman whose house happened to sit smack dab in the middle of the cannon fire and gunfire in July 1861. Her daughter Ellen and the least aide named Lucy lived with her at the time. In addition, one of her sons was visiting her the day when they all heard the cannons booming in the distance. They took Judith out of the house to a safer location. It was here that her 2 children earned, in my opinion, Kid of the Year because they took her back into the house. I will say, in their defense, their mother demanded to go back into the house, so I could sort of understand. However, when they arrived, they found Confederate sharpshooters encamped throughout the house. And as you can imagine, Judith was mortally wounded later that day when a 10-pound shell tore through her bedroom wall. You can see the remnants of Mrs. Henry's house after the First Battle of Manassas in one of the pictures. Ironically, most of the house was still intact from the fighting, but it was dismantled for firewood and keepsakes from the battle. Tours of Manassas National Battlefield typically are done as driving tours with select stops along the dedicated motor coach stops throughout the battlefield. It is recommended to allocate 2 hours for a guided tour, but shorter or more in-depth tours can certainly be arranged. Most groups prefer to have a guide and period of time, but free ranger tours are certainly an option. In addition to the traditional guided tour, Civil War specific experiences can also be added, such as a Civil War medicine with a surgeon, historians interpreting the African-American experience perspective during the time period, and even historic figures such as General Robert E. Lee. Private step-on guides generally run $40 to $50 per hour with a 2-hour minimum plus gratuity. Motor car parking is complimentary, and you do not need a commercial use authorization permit here to offer tours. Just 1 mile down the road from Manassas National Battlefield is Ben Lomond Historic Site, a nearly 200-year-old home that was used by both Confederate and Federal soldiers during the Civil War. After both the first and second battles of Manassas or Bull Run, soldiers were taken here to be tended to. The Pringle family, who were leasing the property at the time, had 2 choices: leave the house or stay and be confined to 1 room with all of the possessions that they could fit. The soldiers and medical staff occupied the rest of the house, surrounding lawn and the outbuildings. Today, the house is interpreted as a field hospital and incorporates a multi-sensory approach to the tour. You can hear what it sounded like in the house with dozens of soldiers in various states of medical need, experience the smell of gangrene. It's fragrant, but not overwhelming, and see what it took to load and fire a musket from the time period. Cool experiences include the campfire programs for student groups where they can make s'mores and hear stories of the 1800s. Historic happy hours where adults can enjoy a craft beverage during your tour. Whiskey was a common drink, but beer is also popular during the time period. And even learning about the early days of baseball. They offer group pricing. Tours generally last 45 to 60 minutes for a standard tour, but can be extended as needed based on the programming you needed. Now, moving across the county to Woodbridge, we'll stop at Ripon Lodge, the second oldest home in Prince William County and built in 1747. This home has fantastic views of the Potomac River. The river was important to the original owner, Richard Blackburn, because he and his son, Thomas, grew tobacco, wheat, and other commodities which they could easily export back to England at the nearby bustling port town of Dumfries. Interestingly, Thomas's daughter married George Washington's nephew, Bushrod Washington, and so you could tie that home into with a visit to Mount Vernon quite easily. Today, the home maintains much of its 1800s charm inside, and guided tours take about an hour. You can do some unique things with groups here at Ripon. For example, a group can have a historical tea inside the home for groups of under 24 or outside under a tent for larger groups. From a full-on traditional tea to a light version, they can customize it to meet your time frame and requests. In addition, the team at Ripon, as well as Ben Lomond, can have history programs which can come to you. Whether you have an adult or student group, their history trunks can come to your hotel or restaurant to provide a unique, educational, and engaging experience. My last stop today is Bristow Manor. Bristow Manor is a 19th century colonial revival style home with multiple spaces to host your groups for a meal. Overlooking the 18th hole of the golf course with the same name, the countryside charm of this venue will make your travelers think you've found a true hidden gem. They can accommodate groups as small as 20 people up to 250. And with multiple packages to choose from for both adults and student groups, you have many ways to nail the hole-in-one for your group. Student group menus start at $20 per person, and adult group menus start at $35 per person. Additionally, because you have so much room here, you could have a DJ or a live band come in to play music while you dance the night away. Oh, and I forgot to mention that you would be the only group here. Since they are closed in the evenings and only open for special events, your group would be the only one teeing off that night. And because I'm not done with golf analogies, I hope we drove home at the reason that why your next tour to Northern Virginia should be a tap-in. So thank you for attending today's virtual tour. Please join us for the other virtual tours in this series to uncover even more exciting experiences available to your groups. You will soon receive registration emails from us to sign up for this session. Lastly, you can view all the past recordings from our other sessions. Now, does anybody have questions?
Any questions?
Hannah, I would like to mention right quick, I know I mentioned about the Arlington House in Arlington, but it is now actually open. So please, everybody, keep that in mind. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I did get a couple private questions. So this one's for Mark with Prince William. It was asking, what is the price for groups to visit the Ben Lomond Historic Site?
Good question. For both Ben Lomond and Rippon Lodge, it's $3 per person for groups of 20 or more. And then you can add on different amenities like the musket firing demonstration or s'mores around a campfire. And that will vary from $1 up to $5, just depending on how in depth of the programming you get.
Fantastic. And then Portia, a question, I believe it's about Arlington National Cemetery. In order to visit some of the notable grave sites that they have, can I walk to them or do they have to ride the tram?
No, as long as you're pretty fit, go ahead, go for it. Yeah, you can definitely walk to them. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
And then I had, there's a question here for me, which is how long would you allow for your group at both Morven and Dodona Manor? And what is the cost of these historic homes? Each is about 90 minutes. The tour at Morven is about an hour, but then you give yourself some time to walk through the Windmill Carriage Museum. And Dodona Manor, the tour is about an hour and 15, but their docents are wonderful and they like to talk. So I would always keep it at 90 minutes just to be sure. And they are both, Morven is $9 a person and Dodona is $10. So right in that $10 range, you could interchange them if need be, based on availability because of that. And those are all the questions I had that came in privately. Did any of the folks on want to speak up or have any further questions? I know this was a long one, so I think everyone's quiet, so I think we're good to go.
Yep, I don't see any questions either as well.
Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great seeing you all.
Thank you.